What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to talk about my biggest trade targets for week 7 of fantasy football. This has become a fan favorite. Every Tuesday, you guys join me and I go over some of the guys that I'm buying low, some of the guys that I'm selling high. I usually go through 5 buy lows, 3 sell highs. Today, we're mixing in maybe a little bit more buy lows than normal. So if you guys do enjoy this video at any point, I encourage you to go down to the bottom of the screen right now, hit the like button. It costs you nothing and it helps us out tremendously. Also, if you haven't already done so, please hit that subscribe button. We are trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by New Year's Day this year. And we're also trying to get as many comments on the videos as possible. So please leave any comments, any questions down below. We will get to them in this video. So without further ado, we're going to get right into this. Let's hit the intro. So a similar theme that I've done in the last few trade targets videos, I've basically talked mostly about elite talents and elite players that you want to be buying low on to help guide yourself to winning a fantasy championship. But in this week, we know it's buy Mageddon. So I'm also going to mix in a few depth starters that if you're in need of players that can start in your flex spot this week, maybe you could go out and acquire those guys as well for some of you that are experiencing some bye week issues this week. As always, we want to buy low on elite talents because they have suppressed value due to public perception. Usually when we're thinking about fantasy assets, we want to think of them in terms of, highs and lows like a stock exchange, hence the name for this YouTube channel. Of course, we want to buy low on these guys when they're at their lowest point in value, and we want to sell and capitalize when they're at their highest point in value. So before I get into this, quick review of the guys that I talked about last week, just in case you were wondering if I know what I'm talking about. AJ Brown and Cooper Kupp were the two biggest buy lows last week. Cooper Kupp, I would say, definitely hit value from what I told you. He could probably be had for a little bit less than what he was actually worth. Of course, he wasn't a huge buy low, but he was a guy that I was willing to buy high on, essentially. AJ Brown, another guy that came out last night and performed pretty well, 9 targets against a very tough Bills defense. So I'm very excited about AJ Brown going forward, and he was playing through an illness at that. So Keenan Allen and Darren Waller were two guys that I talked about as well as TJ Hawkinson, guys that I talked about buying low on. Keenan Allen, again, had another down game, so probably still another buy low candidate for those of you that are looking for a wide receiver 2 type. Darren Waller, same thing. He hasn't yet been the top 3 tight end that he looked like in week 1 or that he was last season. So still elite options that can be had at value right now. So I'm not going to rehash their arguments again, but they are still good buy low candidates. So let's get into the first and second guy on this list because they both play for the same team. And there's a lot of their jerseys hanging behind me right now. And that's Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And those of you guys that have been watching the channel are probably going to understand why Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are buy low candidates for me. But I think the biggest thing that I want to hammer home with this argument is that people are so obsessed with consistency and with being an every week starter that they fail to recognize great assets in the moment. At the end of the season, I have no doubt in my mind that we're going to look back and Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are going to be top 12, top 15 receivers. But people are so obsessed with consistency that they fail to recognize that you can be a top 12, top 15 wide receivers and still be inconsistent, because we've seen a number of guys in fantasy. In fact, pretty much every fantasy asset out there right now has had a down game or two. Even Derrick Henry had a down game in week 1 and a couple weeks ago when he didn't have a touchdown. So these assets are not guys that we want to be fading just because they have a couple down weeks here and there. Yes, Antonio Brown is producing at a high level, and I expect Antonio Brown to be an integral part of the Bucs offense going forward. But one, as I've talked about before, on numerous occasions, really, Evans and Chris Godwin are the 1 and 2 of this offense. They run the most routes. They run close to 90% of the Buccaneers' routes on Tom Brady's dropbacks, where Antonio Brown, on the other hand, hovers around 65%. So yes, when Antonio Brown is on the field, he's getting targets, and he actually has a higher target share on the season than both Evans and Chris Godwin. But he is going to be a lot more boomer bust than those guys because he's simply not on the field as much as they are. And number 2, even if Antonio Brown is great for fantasy, maybe he's even the most talented fantasy receiver on this team, it doesn't matter because this offense is built different, essentially. The Bucs are currently leading the NFL in pass attempts. They're over 30 pass attempts higher than the second closest team. Brady is averaging 45 pass attempts per game right now. And the last 2 games, even where Leonard Fournette's been running the ball well and they've been very good on the ground, Brady still threw the ball over 40 times in the last 2 games. And additionally, this volume is actually good volume. I've talked about in the past the difference between good and bad volume, but the Buccaneers, despite ranking number 1 in the NFL in pass attempts, are also number 1 in pass offense DVOA. So they're throwing the ball a lot. It's very efficient when they throw the ball, and they rank top 5 in pace of play and pace of offense across all game situations, whether they're leading, trailing, game is close, whatever the case is. This offense throws the ball like crazy. My point is that all 3 of these wide receivers are every week top 24 guys the rest of the season. You throw them into your lineup no matter what. I know they're going to have their down games. 2 of them are going to perform this week. Different 2 perform the next week. That's how it's going to work, because there's all 3 of these guys are very talented and they're going to command volume regardless. But this offense has a massive pie of production available, and these guys are all going to get theirs throughout the season. Sure. Is each guy going to be phenomenal each week? No, of course not. But nobody is in fantasy. Not even Derrick Henry is phenomenal each week. So Evans is going to have 5 to 8 bust games this year. Godwin is going to have 5 to 8 bust games this year. Antonio Brown is going to have 5 to 8 bust games this year. And that's okay. The weekly ceiling is what you want from this offense. And anytime I hear and see shit like, what if Antonio Brown's the wide receiver 1 in this offense, which I've seen on numerous occasions during Thursday night's game, I'm always looking to buy low on these guys, because that perception, the perception that Antonio Brown is this Pittsburgh Steelers Antonio Brown, is not true. Yes, he looks great. He looks phenomenal, but he's not playing the number 1 receiver role. And anytime that's the case, I'm looking to buy low on Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And you guys can see some of the trades, as I always do on these trade targets videos. I talk about some of the trades that have happened on the Yahoo trade market. Mike Evans for Josh Jacobs. Again, give me Mike Evans there. Mike Evans for Amari Cooper and Jeff Wilson. Give me Mike Evans there. Mike Evans for Tyler Lockett. Easily give me Mike Evans there. Chris Godwin, you can similar trades for him. Cordero Patterson straight up for Chris Godwin. T. Higgins and Chuba Hubbard for Chris Godwin. Devontae Smith straight up for Chris Godwin. Someone even traded Michael Carter for Chris Godwin. Again, these guys are going to be had at a value because a lot of people, it was a primetime game. They saw Antonio Brown ball out. They saw Leonard Fournette as an integral part of the offense. They're going to think, hey, these Bucs receivers are just going to be too inconsistent. I don't want to have to deal with this headache of whether or not to start them, which guys this week. I'm telling you guys right now, the answer is that you start them all every week and you deal with the consequences, because nobody is consistent in fantasy. And we need to stop being so obsessed with consistency, because the ceiling that each of these guys give you on a weekly basis is real. You saw it from Mike Evans 2 weeks ago, saw it from Antonio Brown this week. We saw it from Chris Godwin earlier in the season. I would say between Evans and Godwin, Chris Godwin is the one that is the biggest buy low, because Mike Evans did have a blow-up game 2 games ago. So go out and buy these guys, because a lot of people are going to be obsessed with Antonio Brown, and they're going to just fail to recognize that all 3 of these guys are very valuable. So staying in the NFC South, we're actually going to move over to the Carolina Panthers, another wide receiver that has underperformed relative to the expectations he set at the beginning of the year. And this is kind of similar to Cooper Kupp, what I talked about last week. You are not going to be able to buy low on DJ Moore necessarily, who is the next guy that we're going to talk about. But what we're doing with DJ Moore is we're simply capitalizing on perceived value once again. 2 straight games where DJ Moore has finished outside the top 36 receivers in half PPR scoring. Plus, Sam Darnold is looking mortal. He's not looking like the Sam Darnold that we saw in the first 3 weeks, where like this guy's the next Ryan Tannehill. He looks like an actual great quarterback in the NFL. That Sam Darnold looking like the Sam Darnold of old, the Sam Darnold that we saw in New York, is going to sour the view of DJ Moore owners, and it shouldn't, because DJ Moore is averaging over 10 targets per game. His target share is nearly 30%, and he's being deployed in all facets of the field. He's being deployed in the short game. He's being deployed in intermediate, first down usage. He's being deployed in the deep game. He's being deployed in the red zone. Everything you want out of DJ Moore, you're getting. It's just a matter of the fact that they've played 2 tough matchups the last couple of weeks. Both the Vikings and the Eagles rank top 12 in pass defense DVOA, and both of them rank top 12 in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So tough matchups for DJ Moore. Again, it looks like this offense isn't going to steamroll everybody like it looked like in the first 3 games. The Carolina Panthers do look like a mortal offense, and DJ Moore can be had at a mortal price now, where before you were going to have to pay out the nose for him. And as you guys can see on the screen, I've highlighted a couple trades that I really do like. As much as I like Mike Evans, I would rather have DJ Moore rest of season. So if you can pull off a trade like that, that is definitely a good move to pull off. Adam Thielen, a perfect example of a guy that just had a blow-up game that you could capitalize on and get DJ Moore in return. Adam Thielen's produced in the past. Therefore, people are going to be likely to trust him if you try and trade away Adam Thielen for DJ Moore. I'm willing to bet you might be able to get that done, even though Adam Thielen has been not nearly as good as DJ Moore and is competing with Justin Jefferson. Maybe you have to add in a small piece or something like that. So DJ Moore, another guy that I'm actively buying this week in fantasy football. I think he's going to be just fine the rest of the season. Top 10 guy going forward, actually a top 8 guy in my rest of season rankings. Moving on to number 3, the third trade target on this list is basically 4 different guys, and I'm just going to label them as any elite bell cow running back. And specifically, the guys that I'm talking about are Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler, and Dalvin Cook. These guys all have differing concerns, whether it's injury in the case of Saquon Barkley and Dalvin Cook, or it's the offense in the case of Alvin Kamara, or it's some inconsistency from what we've seen from Austin Eckler. But this week is a prime time to snatch up any of these elite guys. And the reason is because these 2-for-1s are going to be even more lethal than they already are. I always talk about these 2-for-1 type of trades, especially if you guys are in any kind of shallow league format where maybe you only start 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 1 flex. If you can pull off a trade where you're able to package 2 running backs or a running back and a wide receiver to get up to these guys, these are truly elite assets, because the key to upgrading your team and building a winner is knowing when to pounce on elite assets. And in my opinion, this is the time for these 4 elite running backs specifically. For example, Darrell Henderson is a back that has had 2 straight games performing very well. With all the bye weeks this week, you can offer Darrell Henderson and a guy like Darrell Williams, Chuba Hubbard, any of these like backup running backs, or maybe a low-end wide receiver 2 like T. Higgins or something like that, maybe Tyler Lockett. You can offer Darrell Henderson plus that for an elite running back like this. You can offer Darrell Henderson and Darrell Williams and try and go get Alvin Kamara, or maybe it takes Darrell Henderson and T. Higgins to go get Alvin Kamara. Whatever the case is, these are some examples below that you guys can see. Alvin Kamara was acquired in exchange for DeAndre Hopkins and Damian Harris. Again, with bye weeks, people are going to need players to start. They're going to panic. They're going to sell some of their elite assets who have not quite been performing, like Derrick Henry, for example, at a lower price than they normally would. Again, Dalvin Cook acquired for Leonard Fournette and Elijah Mitchell. As much as I love Leonard Fournette and think he's going to be great the rest of the season, give me Dalvin Cook every day of the week. Dalvin Cook for Melvin Gordon and Chase Edmonds. Again, that might be a bye week panic situation. Maybe that person has Ezekiel Elliott and James Robinson on bye, and they're going to sell their Dalvin Cook because they need players to start. People will do stuff like that. Maybe they won't do it in your league if your league is a little bit sharper. But again, I'm speaking to a general populace when I do these videos. So if you can pull off something like that in your league, I would go ahead and do it. Like I said, these elite bell cow running backs is how you win fantasy championships. A lot of the time, and in my case specifically, I wasn't able to draft these guys because I didn't have a high enough draft pick in my home league. So I'm looking to acquire them on the cheap when they're coming off of down games or they have some concerns, aligning with them, because we've seen all 4 of these guys produce at an elite level. So I have no questions about their ability to command touches and command volume and hold up to a full workload. So number 4 on this list, the final couple guys that we're going to talk about in the buy lows category of this video. It's 3 guys that are coming off of IR, and specifically Jerry Jeudy, Michael Gallup, and Jarvis Landry. And these are some of the guys that I talked about at the beginning of the video when I said some of these guys are going to be bye week fill-ins for a lot of people, but I think all these guys are much more than that. I'm personally in a league with 3 wide receiver spots and 2 flex spots. So guys like this are very valuable because, in my opinion, Jeudy, Gallup, and Landry, once they're back on the field, are all every week starters in that type of format where you can start multiple wide receivers, up to 5 wide receivers in my format. So these guys have all been out of sight, out of mind. These guys are all like every week flexes, with Jerry Jeudy having a little bit more upside than that. But as you guys can see on the screen, you can get these guys for fringe level assets that I don't really believe in long-term. As you guys can see, Jarvis Landry was acquired for Melvin Gordon. Jarvis Landry was acquired for Elijah Mitchell. You can use Jarvis Landry and kind of throw in deals with Miles Sanders and Emmanuel Sanders like that. Of course, Michael Gallup acquired for Brandon Ayuk, who's basically unstartable at this point. Jerry Jeudy acquired for Odell Beckham, who's not really performing to the level that he should be. Jerry Jeudy as a throw-in to upgrade or to downgrade from Matthew Stafford to Kirk Cousins. Again, a lot of these guys are going to be very valuable this week if you can acquire them to help fill in for your bye weeks. And I also think, like I said, all these guys, Michael Gallup, Jerry Jeudy, and Jarvis Landry, are every week wide receiver 3, every week flex plays that you can use the rest of the season. So all 3 of these guys, because they've been on IR, are going to be out of sight, out of mind for some people, and they can be acquired on the cheap. So those are guys that I'm definitely looking to acquire. Now, moving from the buys, we're going to go on to the sells and some of the guys that I think you should be actively looking to shop away from your fantasy teams. And I kind of just touched on one of them, but Courtland Sutton is a guy that I'm looking to sell actively. If I have Courtland Sutton on my roster, the Jerry Jeudy return is imminent. It's going to either happen this week on Thursday Night Football, or it's going to happen in week 8. It sounds like there's a 50-50 chance that it happens in week 7. We saw in week 1, when Jerry Jeudy was healthy, in 3 quarters that he played this season, he commanded a 21% target share in only 3 quarters of play. And not only that, but the average depth of target of these 2 guys and the difference between it is why I like Jerry Jeudy a lot more. Jerry Jeudy's average depth of target, and what I talked about all offseason with Teddy Bridgewater as the quarterback, was 11.5 yards. He was in that possession receiver role, the guy that's moving the sticks, moving the chains, whereas Sutton's has been around 17 all season, including in that week 1 game when both of them were on the field. Courtland Sutton is the field stretcher, downfield option, where Jerry Jeudy is the target hog. And the target hog is who I want for a quarterback like Teddy Bridgewater. Now, if we had Josh Allen as the quarterback, we might be talking about a different story, or Patrick Mahomes, for example. But the target hog is what you want in Teddy Bridgewater's offense. Back-to-back top 10 finishes on the weeks for Courtland Sutton should be enough to move him for a solid option. And the guys that I talked about at the beginning of this video are perfect trade targets for a guy like Courtland Sutton. If you can trade Courtland Sutton straight up for Chris Godwin or DJ Moore or Mike Evans, absolutely do that. Even if you have to add in a small piece to get up to DJ Moore or Mike Evans, if you have to trade Courtland Sutton and, a back-end RB2 for the time being, like Darrell Williams, to get up to DJ Moore, I'm okay doing something like that as well. So Courtland Sutton, definitely a guy that I'm looking to sell. As you guys can see, some of the trades highlighted on the screen. Somebody sold Courtland Sutton straight up for Lamar Jackson. Give me Lamar Jackson there. Courtland Sutton straight up for Amari Cooper and Mike Gesicki. Give me the Amari Cooper side of things. This guy packaged Courtland Sutton and Leonard Fournette and was able to get up to Austin Eckler. Again, perfect example of what I talked about with the 3 bell cow running backs. And the final 2 sell highs that we're going to talk about here is Darrell Henderson and Leonard Fournette. Now, these guys are not guys that I'm looking to sell because I don't believe in them. I do believe in them as rest of season RB2s, probably mid RB2s, even high end RB2s, coming off of 2 straight weeks for both guys that they really performed. But I'm always looking to upgrade in fantasy football. I'm not looking at Leonard Fournette and Darrell Henderson like, boom, I'm set at running back. I don't need to make any trades. These guys are going to be rest of season RB1s. What I'm looking at with these guys is what's the realistic expectation, right? Because Darrell Henderson has been a guy that's dealt with some small injuries in the past. Leonard Fournette, same thing. And also the Bucs offense is just so pass heavy that Leonard Fournette is going to have games where if he doesn't get into the end zone, he's not going to be very valuable for fantasy. And you could probably say the same thing about Darrell Henderson. So I'm always looking to upgrade and capitalize on RB2s having huge games, which is what I believe these guys are. Neither of these guys are the focal points of their offense, which is going to make them inconsistent RB2s. But like I said before, if you can take Darrell Henderson plus Khalil Herbert or Darrell Williams or Chuba Hubbard and upgrade to a borderline elite running back like Saquon Barkley or like Dalvin Cook or like Alvin Kamara, I'm doing that all day. Even if you have to upgrade to a borderline elite wide receiver, if you can trade Darrell Henderson and Darrell Williams for Justin Jefferson or for Cooper Kupp or for somebody like that, I'm absolutely looking to make a move like that as well. So as you guys can see on the screen, a couple of the trades that have happened for Darrell Henderson specifically, Darrell Henderson straight up for Mike Evans and Josh Jacobs. Again, give me Mike Evans and Josh Jacobs there. Darrell Henderson and Cordero Patterson for Christian McCaffrey. Again, if you're 6-0, if you're 5-1, I don't hate that move whatsoever. Darrell Henderson straight up for Saquon Barkley. Somebody got Saquon Barkley straight up for Darrell Henderson. And in that situation, I'd imagine the Saquon Barkley owner was 1-5 or 2-4, and they need to get immediate production. So make sure you're paying attention to what are these teams that have these elite running backs, what is their record right now? Because if the Christian McCaffrey owner is 5-1, I highly doubt they're going to trade Christian McCaffrey. If the Saquon Barkley owner is 4-2 or better, they're probably not going to trade Saquon Barkley. So make sure you're always paying attention to things like that. And then kind of an honorable mention, sell high. Float some of these backup fill-ins as throw-in pieces. Like I said, Khalil Herbert, Darrell Williams, Alex Collins, Chuba Hubbard. If you can use these pieces as throw-ins in other trades, then they are absolutely worthy of, making those elite upgrades like I talked about. So as I mentioned before, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button down below. It helps us out tremendously. It helps us grow. Speaking of helping us grow, please help us grow specifically by hitting the subscribe button. Comment any of your thoughts down below. Like I said, if you want access to my rest of season rankings, my weekly rankings, my dynasty rankings, everything relating to fantasy football rankings, you can go to the website, thefantasystockexchange.com. There you can find both mine and Danny's weekly rankings and rest of season rankings by simply paying for them for $20. You can use promo code FSE on Underdog Fantasy at sign up and first deposit. You'll get a $10 bonus on whatever you deposit, and you'll get our rest of season rankings, weekly rankings, and dynasty rankings for free, just as a thank you for using our code. Or you can become a Patreon at patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange. Link is in the description for that. Peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.